Hello everyone, welcome to Magnus' Sacrificial game against Hikaru. Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru drew their first two games. They were relatively solid draws. In the first game Magnus was pressing a bit. Now let's get started.
Yuko piano with c3 and d3 pianissimo. Very quiet, and basically what black is going to decide to do is whether to play d6 or d5. He chooses to go d5 this way, opens up the lines for the players, and makes the position a little bit more complex.
Now I'm going to tell something quick. Not about the result. This was a 19-move game. I can't cover all 19 moves explanations, so we're going to kind of glide on through the middle game here. Players developing. Magnus expands on the queen side with a 4-5, trying to take a little bit of space.
We have knight back to f6 by Hikaru wants to get out of the way. The bishop maybe plea for put a little bit of pressure here before bishop d6 knight d2, and because just blocks it all up with a
6. Now Magnus makes a big trade here. He trades knights in the middle of the board, and he's saying that he has a nice little space advantage on the queen side. Black's pieces are a little bit passive and a little bit clumsy.
So Hikaru plays king h8 with potentially the idea of playing f5 and getting out of the pin. Queen d3, queen e7.
Hikaru routes the knight to the center of the board.
And now a very common idea, knight to h4, outmaneuvering, outflanking, trying to land on f5. What would happen if you play g6? g6 solves a short-term problem, but opens up a long-term problem.
First of all, dark square weaknesses on the side of the board. Second of all, the fact that this bishop is on the verge of getting trapped. So Hikaru just chooses to allow it. And Magnus keeps that knight there for a long time. That knight stays there, and he just continues to improve his position. Very slowly, brings his king up, because maybe in the future he's actually going to advance these points. Now Hikaru goes here, and now and only now, Magnus trades the knight. Okay, well, Magnus Carlsen loses a bishop.
I mean, he's got to prove it. He could play moves like c4, b5, h for Rajic 1 grams, not bishop takes b7. The idea being that after this there's e5, which attacks the queen, and the rook in the corner, the queen as the slide back guarding the rook.
Now pawn takes pawn, queen goes here, and we have this move. And you can't take the rook because of check. It's not that. It's actually the point is root 4, and Magnus will pick up a third pawn. So Magnus sacrifices a piece for 3 pawns to get queen, rook, and 7 versus queen, rook, bishop, and 4. What does Magnus have? 4 pawns that are rolling together. This is a very important point for black. It stops everything. That pawn is black's lifeline. Magnus also has good pawn positioning here. And as this game progresses, he begins just slowly improving his position. At this point, both players have about a minute to write. They repeat once, they're going to repeat a little bit. Magnus finally says, let's break through. I gotta break on through, but not take the pawn. I need to keep my d pawn safe, and I need to hit the bottom. We have backing up. Magnus plays a way to move on to a 3. King of a king of 2 kings. Kings u3. And here the players chose that site. No repetition.
Queen takes g5.
Rook 6. Queen c77. Black is hanging on for dear life. Queen.
The e5 check, king has to go here because if you play bishop 6, I just take, so we have queen 5, king d7, and now
not a king on. Very, very precisely like Kingsley 6 apparently as possible, and even just getting the pawn out of the way of the queen. But he chose queen of fate with the intention of this, and getting in with the queen. The problem is that after queen to evade, there's the ever so slightly boop, and black's king doesn't have a comfortable score to go to. It goes here.
They repeat once, and now Magnus realizes he can take if king takes, queen c5x, raise the king to the queen if queen takes,
which is the only other move. Now you are just in a pawn up endgame. Now to the on again. To the untrained eye, this is just a drop because black will check white forever. That's what black is going to do. Just give a million checks. Watch the way Magnus centralizes in queen endgames. You need the queen to be dominant. So the queen centralizes against the other queen, and now he begins to kick black's king away, preventing the only checks that Hikaru has. And then the most beautiful planet. Just bring the king. It just brings the king like he centralizes, the queen check to defend the pawn, and just brings the king is just fully cerebral of the fact that he needs to win using a certain game plan, and he implements it. He makes the ever so slight improvements. He wins time by giving checks, and he just extracts. He calls queen away from defending everything. And a few months later, he ended up winning the airport. Some years later, like 4 moves from now, 2 moves from now, another one is going to be lost. There's just nothing he could do. He sacrifices the pawn to win the pawn. I told you that one was that was the lifeline. And it takes a little bit of converting, but the pawn. By the way, if you see what happened here, he didn't take and make a queen. This game is actually kind of tricky to win if it's even winning at all. This game might actually just be a draw because of where the sport is, but it's a lot harder to win. It's very tricky when those games are what maybe it's winning for white, but it's not easy. So instead, you just go to your point is you can't push the button. And this is definitely winning because here you'll give a check or 26. You have the beep, not the 1. So Magnussen's of winning this game will move 90. Can't resign here. He played this move with 1 second on the clock, but it didn't really matter because check. And so Magnus wins.